Welcome back to Law&Crime Trial Network. I'm Stacey Delikat, and thanks for being with us on this Friday afternoon. We want to move now to a case out of Ohio, a very tragic case, and that is the death of Judy Malinowski. She was 33 years old when she died, but it came nearly 2 years after her boyfriend doused her with gasoline, then lit her on fire. Judy Malinowski, a mother of 2 young girls, after being burnt, she suffered from burns over most of her body. She was in the hospital for 700 days, underwent some 5 dozen surgeries, but ultimately doctors were not able to save her life and were not able to spare her from this unimaginable pain she says she felt as the result of her injuries. Well, the man who did this to her, Michael Slager, was supposed to go on trial beginning next week, but this week he decided to take a plea deal. He will now serve out life in prison for Judy Malinowski's murder. But there are a lot of interesting facts to this case. And that is that about 5 months before she passed away, prosecutors were able to persuade a judge to allow Judy Malinowski to film a deposition from her hospital bed. It is very rare, perhaps even unprecedented, for a jury to hear from a murder victim once they are already dead. Now, during this emotional testimony from her bed, as you are about to hear, Judy Malinowski talks about the pain that she was in, talks about the moment this happened to her, her vivid recollections of her boyfriend setting her on fire and the evil look on his face as she was, her skin was burning up and she was crying for help. But here's what's also interesting. This video deposition may have, is actually what saved Michael Slager from the death penalty as he took this plea for life in prison. But during the deposition, attorneys asked Malinowski whether or she wanted him to face the death penalty or not. And she said she believed that Slager should just serve out life in prison. It is very emotional testimony. It is at times tough to watch. You can see just how badly burnt and injured she is. But let's go now and listen to Judy Malinowski's words on her very own murder.
And you're laying there holding yourself up on one hand, and he's pouring gasoline on you. What's his demeanor as he's pouring the gasoline on you?
You will just completely, you believe not responding to any of my cries for help. You won't tell me why. You just, like, you want to throw something on them, or you want to throw a cop on me, see what I'll do to you, bitch, and how you like this, and offers the property.
Okay. So Judy, was this a joking demeanor? You poured something on him and poured something on you, ha, isn't this funny?
No, it was an evil demeanor.
Okay. And after you poured the gasoline on you, what happens next?
He backed away from me for about 30 seconds, and I kept on to please help me and stop, and I'll get the stuff on those deals. You know, why would you do this? And looked at him, and he pulled a lighter out of his pocket, and he started walking towards me, and I just remember crying and begging for help, and he left me on fire, and the look in his eyes were, his eyes went black, literally, after I was set on fire. That's when his eyes just turned black as I screamed for his help.
Okay.
He did nothing.
Okay. So this entire time you're asking for help, but did you make up with him in any way during these 30 seconds between him pouring gasoline on you and pulling out the lighter and setting you on fire?
No.
And what happened as you stood behind that speedway?
Mike came in a matter of, he doesn't have it all around in his truck. He saw me and immediately slammed the truck to the park, got out, demanded that I got into the truck with him, called me all sorts of names. We argued for a good 5 to 10 minutes, and then walking. Yes.
Did you splash it on him or actually throw the cup at him?
I threw the cup at him.
Okay, and this cup, was it a hard plastic or paper, or what was it made out of?
I believe it was a styrofoam cup.
Okay. Did the drink get on him?
Yes.
What was his reaction to this?
He was extremely upset.
And what did he do?
He ran around the belly side of his truck, and he got his, the gasoline that he had cut in the back of his truck. It was really big and had a lot of gas. He ran around with me and started pouring gasoline, started up my head and worked his way down. Some got in my throat as he did that. That hurt really bad.
The gasoline in your throat burnt really bad?
Yes.
And what happened as a result of having this gasoline poured on you?
He then set me on fire.
Let's slow down a little bit.
Well, there you hear it. Very emotional testimony, a deposition recorded from her hospital bed. That was Judy Malinowski about 5 months before she passed away as the result of her injuries. Her boyfriend, Michael Slager, doused her in gasoline, then lit her on fire. She survived 700 days in the hospital, underwent more than 60 surgeries, and the trial for Michael Slager was supposed to get underway today. Jury selection was supposed to get underway today, but yesterday Slager took a guilty plea. He will now spend the rest of his life in prison. I am joined now by Bonnie Bowes. She is Judy's mother. Thank you so much for being with us. I know it must be an emotional week there in Franklin County, Ohio for you.
That is true.
How did you feel yesterday when Michael Slager entered his guilty plea?
Relieved, for sure.
Yeah.
Relieved for justice that he took accountability.
You know, we heard in the deposition that your daughter recorded that she did not want the death penalty, right? And I know in your victim impact statement yesterday, which was very strong and brave, you referenced that when you faced Michael Slager. You said, you know, she wanted him to live, which was very generous of her. Is that something you had discussed with your daughter, whether she would or not she would want the death penalty for Michael?
Yes, we did. We discussed that many times, and she didn't want him to have the death penalty. She thought his life should be spared in hopes that he would find some sort of I think she hoped that as long as he was alive, that perhaps he would find remorse and find God. She said multiple times she was sorry that he had did this to her. Being his victim in the domestic violence for their short-term relationship that they did have, she was really sorry that she had even thrown her pop on him, which provoked him to go to his truck and doused her in several gallons of gas. So she didn't want that. She thought she should show compassion.
Wow, that really is incredible. You know, you said she hoped he would find some remorse, and I know he did give a very brief apology to you and your granddaughters in court yesterday. Did you feel that that was a sufficient apology?
You know, I guess only God can judge one's heart. I think a crime of the nature that he did to Judy, which I think proved in itself in the number of days that she was in the hospital and all the surgeries and the fact that she wasn't breathing and just the heinous crime in itself was enough to. I just couldn't say for sure if that was truly an apology or if that was to perhaps maybe just save face for his family. You know, only one, who knows one's heart.
Yeah. This deposition, it was so powerful to watch and really heartbreaking, I'm sure, especially for you to see your daughter like that again. But I know this was something that prosecutors and that you had fought to allow to happen, for her to record this deposition. How important was it to Judy to make sure her words were saved on the record and could be used in court?
Well, it was important enough for her to back off on her pain medicine, knowing that she was burned, as badly as she was burned, and to put her entire life out there for the world, and to face her attacker, and to face the defense.
Bonnie, I know you have said your daughter did not die in vain, and I want to talk about that. First, we are going to take a quick break, but to our viewers, stay with us. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Judice Law and how that will change a lot of people's situations who have suffered from domestic violence. Stay with us. Welcome back to Law&Crime Trial Network. I'm Stacey Delikat. We are talking about Judy Malinowski. She's a 33-year-old woman from Ohio who was doused with gasoline, set on fire by her boyfriend back in 2015. She did survive for 700 days with burns all over her bodies, but ultimately she passed away from her injuries. Michael Slager, her ex-boyfriend, was set to go on trial today. Jury selection was set to begin, but yesterday he decided to take a plea deal. While he would have faced the death penalty if he had gone to trial, he will now spend life in prison. Bonnie Bowes, Judy's mother, is still with me via Skype from Franklin County, Ohio. And thank you again for being with us, Bonnie. I want to talk about your daughter's legacy. And you mentioned this in your statement yesterday, that her death is not in vain, right? And that is because of something known as Judice Law. Can you tell our viewers about that?
Judice Law came about because when Judy was burned, the laws were so antiquated that if you assaulted somebody and disfigured them, or as in Judy's case, burned them 95% of their body or more, there was no differentiation in the amount of time that the courts could put on an assault charge or an arson charge. So arson carried the same amount of time as if you burnt someone's car or you burn a human being. So with that said, when she survived, when they were able to resuscitate her and survive, and they filed, the only thing the state of Ohio could really charge him with was either arson or assault, which both carried the same small sentence in Ohio. So the maximum I believe they could give him was 8 years, and then they were able to compile some additional charges on him. That prompted legislation. Judge Julie Lynch at that time said, and it was quite obvious that that was not nearly enough time for the heinous crime of being beaten and doused with gasoline and set on fire. So that prompted legislation. Senator Jim Hughes, after Judge Julie Lynch had Shirley had said legislation needed change, Senator Hughes stepped up and wrote a law called Judice Law that would allow the courts to impose additional penalties based on the burns and disfigurement to any person, and differentiate, arson from actually lighting a person on fire and things like that nature.
And it certainly does make sense, because certainly burning someone all over their body is not the same thing as burning someone's car. To the example that you raised, I understand that the Ohio Senate passed this law the day after Judy's death, right?
That is correct. They passed it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Has it helped you and Judy's daughters and the rest of your family as you grieve and move on to know that there is now this lasting impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's not in vain. Domestic violence is horrible, and we need to have the right laws in place. So, she died, but she died, and with this law in place now, at least there will be additional justice imposed. It was not in time for Judy, but certainly in time for other people.
And in addition to Judice Law, which was passed several years ago in Ohio, you're now working on a documentary about her story. Tell us a little bit about that and what we can expect.
Well, we're working on a documentary that actually depicts Judy's story. You know, there's so much of the story from the 700 days that she was in the hospital. There's so much of the story from the time that they met to be told, along with Judy's young life and somewhat of who Judy was prior to the heinous crime that was attacked on her. And Judy has two little girls that she left behind, and how it's impacted them and myself and the family.
How are they doing? I know her oldest daughter was with you in court yesterday, but the younger one really too young to still grasp this, as you said.
Yeah, she's too young to grasp it. Her older one took the hearing pretty hard. It was hard for the defense to. It was hard for her to listen to them talk on Michael's behalf. The defense team say, you know, well, he's bonded with his daughters and he wants to be able to see her. That's why he's making this plea. And certainly at the age of 14, she sat and listened to a lot of that and processed that. And while she is starting high school without her mom and has gone the last 2 years of watching her mom burn beyond recognition and eventually succumb to her injuries. So that was real tough for a 14-year-old kid to sit in the courtroom and hear and understand that that was his right to take his side.
I can only imagine, and as we talked about before the break, that emotional video of your daughter in her hospital bed delivering her deposition a few months before she passed away. I know that was unsealed. That was the first time probably anyone outside of prosecutors and the judge and your immediate family had seen it. Was her daughter in the courtroom for that? Had she seen this video before?
No, her daughter had never seen it. None of us had that video.
Oh, you had not? Okay.
The appellate court had ruled that that video would remain sealed, and it was not to be unsealed until there was a hearing or it was to be used for impact witnesses, etc. So nobody had seen it except the legal team, the defense, and of course Michael. She faced him because that's Ohio law. You have to face your attacker in order to do the deposition. So none of us had seen it, and that was the first time anybody had seen it other than the legal team, Judy, and Michael.
Yeah, I can only imagine how difficult that was for everyone. You know, as a stranger, it was difficult for me to watch it. You could see the pain on her face. I have to ask you, Judy, because as I mentioned, I listened to your statement yesterday, and you were so composed. I know this was years ago now that you lost your daughter, but or a year ago. How were you able to maintain your composure in a situation like this after everything you and your family have been through?
I guess first and foremost, my faith has helped me maintain my composure. And then secondly, I really had to focus on what Judy wanted from her hospital bed. And Judy did not want him to have the death penalty. And I had to focus on that. And if Judy could find compassion, then I just had to tell myself I have to find compassion and I have to follow what it is that she wanted me to carry out for her. It's very difficult, and I am raising her two little girls now, so it's really difficult from a mother's perspective to do that, but I had to honor her last wishes, and her last wishes were that to save his life in hopes that he would turn his life around before God took his life.
Bonnie, before I let you go, I just want to ask you, how do you want Judy to be remembered? We know now her death was not in vain. Her legacy will live on through this crucial legislation that was passed in Ohio. But as a person, how do you want her to be remembered?
I think I would want her to be remembered for the loving, caring person that she is, as well as bravery. I mean, I think the fact that she said, if this just helps one woman, and she started out, then all her pain and suffering was not in vain. I think that pretty much speaks for itself. That she would endure that kind of pain, suffering, when all the doctors said she wouldn't live 7 hours. In her mind, just to help one woman, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, and we wish the very best to you and your family, and of course to Judy's daughters. Hopefully you guys will have some closure now. So thank you, Bonnie, again for being with us here on the Law&Crime Trial Network.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and that will about do it for us here on the Law&Crime Trial Network. We want to thank you all for tuning in today. Remember to tune in Monday. Some new trials coming up for you, including the murder trial against James Colley. That'll be starting on Monday. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday morning.